So welcome everyone to the Astrology Squad. We're here to give you the astrological inside track on newsmakers, celebrities, historical figures. But by doing so, we hope to teach you about the planets and the zodiac signs so you can learn more about your own horoscope, as well as what astrology can and cannot offer. My name is Frank Clifford. I'm a full-time astrologer, writer, and teacher. I run the London School of Astrology, which offers courses online and in London. And I'm delighted to be here with my co-host, Richard Swatton, and our very special and eminent guest, Pam Gregory. Richard, you happy to introduce yourself?
Yes, I've been teaching at the London School of Astrology for, 12 years now, maybe 14 years. I've been lecturing since 1988, and I was a student and diploma holder of the Centre for Psychological Astrology. And I am now a practicing psychotherapist since '94. I've been a professional and a professional astrologer. And I do psychological astrology, but on my YouTube channel, I've done a lot of mundane in 19 and 20, and I'm at the moment engaged in doing a lot of horary astrology, which I've always been fascinated with because it gives you the detail of chart, and so details of charts, and very much to do with divinatory work. But generally, I work natally, and a kind of combination between humanistic, psychological, and practical guidance, something like that.
Thanks, Richard. And Pam, are you happy to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Pam Gregory, very busy YouTube channel, Pam Gregory Astrology. Also, I have several teaching videos from my website, pamgregory.com, quite a long detailed monthly newsletter, and I've written 2 books, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? And How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe.
Wonderful. Both of those are great books. I recommend them. Thank you. Thanks, Pam. So in this video, we're looking at the notable scientist and quite eccentric genius, Albert Einstein. This is his chart. In front of us, we have a birth time for him that came from a birth record. And Einstein is considered to be one of the supreme intellects of all time. His name is synonymous with the word genius, and best known for his theories of relativity and his contributions to quantum mechanics, which are the cornerstones of modern science. And his work really revolutionized science by denying the existence of any absolute time. So what we normally do when we look at a chart is we tend to zoom in on the main features, the chart shaping, and we look at the sun, moon, and the ascendant, also known as the rising sign. Richard, is there something you'd like to start with the sun, moon, and ascendant?
Yes, I think so. I mean, when we look at the sun, I think it's important to realize that it's a kind of central element and that everything revolves around it. So the story of the sun is the story of a person's life journey and the searching within their life to make whatever potentials there are in their life to manifest them, to bring them forward. And so it's to become conscious and to realize, I suppose, a certain push forward that Jung called individuation or self-realization. And so certain people see that as the purpose of life. Some people see that as just living life. So I always like to think the sun as our relationship to the life force. And so when it's in Pisces, in the 10th house, generally speaking, we must say that the person's professional, their vocation, has a lot to do with the expression of their individuality. The two, in fact, are the same thing. He may do it in a Piscean way, that is half in, half out of life, half in his imagination, creative imagination, and then half within the practice. And I think this fits Einstein very well. The great trouble for any sun in Pisces, of course, is the fact that the sun is individuality. It's the separateness of the individual which seeks expression in the world. So that when you have it in a sign like this, which expresses all and everything, it's a kind of fluidic, half in, half out of the world kind of sign, then the main question that arises is, how are you going to express everything? How are you going to express all of the potentiality of life when the sun is in it. And I think that the idea of Einstein trying to work at the end of his life on a unified field theory, for example, is very important. Just want to say a couple more things, is that when you see the dispositor of the sign, that Jupiter is in Aquarius, we can definitely see the scientific element here, a leading light, if you like, in the generation of new knowledge, the ninth house stuff. But the Aquarian gives a kind of mental abstraction, and his whole process to do with intellectual experiments, or what he called thought experiments. We can see this, the chart is showing this very, very clearly. And in the ninth house, the house of discovery, the house of science, the house of mythic belief and scientific belief, as well as mythic belief, it's as if he's born to do that. So you get a coloration of the sun sign by the dispositor. The moon in Sagittarius obviously is hungry for knowledge, hungry for a way to use that knowledge, to being in the sixth house. But I'm reminded with the moon that it's very much to do with soul food. So he belonged in that. And of course, the dispositor of the moon is that Jupiter in Aquarius, the only planet in an air sign, which often relates to the intellect and the understanding, I suppose, of abstract principles. I wonder whether he lived half in and half out of life. He lived in life when he was having his affairs, of course. So the dispositor of the moon, the ruling the ascendant, you see, makes him very affable, very pleasant, very nice, very loving in a way. But this abstract moon in Sagittarius, looking for the meaning behind. I think Liz Green called this the sign of looking for the eternal laws of life, and his emotional sense of belonging would be drawn towards that. So that's just a preliminary introduction to the sun, the moon, and the ascendant.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know the word dispositor, it is a planet that is said to rule that particular sign. So Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so we call that planet the dispositor. And Pisces as well, the sun is in Pisces, and that's ruled by Jupiter, traditionally, classically in astrology, and of course ruled by the modern discovery of Neptune as well as its modern ruler. So Pam, where would you like to go with the sun, moon, ascendant?
Yes, this is such a beautiful chart, because obviously the ascendant in Cancer is a very sensitive water sign, super sensitive, empathetic, gentle. His sun is also in a water sign, Pisces, again, super creative and sensitive. There's a kind of morph and flow with Pisces energy. There's a desire to connect to something greater than self. There's a strong spiritual urge, and to devote oneself. It's very devotional energy, I think of with Pisces, to devote self to something greater than self, but to live an ideal life, a special life, and on a daily basis to connect to the ethereal, to the divine, to source, however you define that. There's a yearning quality, I think, that comes in very strongly, and it's emphasized not only by the sun being in Pisces, but it's also semi-square the modern ruler of Pisces, which is Neptune. And there are other classic signatures here. We have Neptune in a square to his nodal axis. And I think of the nodal axis as the soul's path of growth in this life. So therefore he had to bring in a spiritual element, this reaching out to bring in the spiritual as part of the context of whatever he was going to do. And again, that's emphasized by the North Node in the 8th house, which is the house of deep spiritual matters. And he has a classic signature of the mystic, which is Jupiter, Neptune equals the world axis, the Aries point. And that means that that particular midpoint, the combination of Jupiter and Neptune, the ancient ruler of Pisces, the modern ruler, is thrust onto the public stage, is in some way as a philosopher or a mystic. But what really excited me, the moon being in Sagittarius, both Pisces and Sagittarius are mutable signs. So we have a sun-moon blend in mutable signs, which means no boundary. And the word that kept coming to me when I was looking at this chart is is boundlessness. Boundlessness with the sun moon blend, but also the fact that Jupiter is very happy in its natural 9th house. This is a kind of reaching out to the cosmos here. There's no boundary, there's no limit to his thinking. And I understand that he used to take his little boat out on the lake at night and stare at the stars. And that's when his real thinking, I mean, how Piscean is that? That's when his great ideas came in. But what then really excited me is that his moon at 14 of Sagittarius is on something an anomaly in space called the Great Attractor. And the Great Attractor is this massive gravitational force in space that sucks galaxies. It's like a huge cosmic vacuum cleaner that moves backwards at about 600 kilometers a second, sucking galaxies in its wake. It has an incredible gravitational pull, and it bends time and space. It warps time and space, and it bends light. So what was he developing in his theories of relativity? It was about gravitation and light, essentially. And it was a revolution, you know, E equals mc squared, the most famous sort of quotation in the world in that sense, was a revolution in the concept of time and space. So there's something profound here with the moon rules his whole chart because it rules Cancer, about gravitation and about the bending of light and time and space and how they all fit together to become part of his theory of relativity. And I agree very much with Richard. There's a sort of detached intellectual clarity here, yes, as well, with Jupiter in Aquarius, and also Uranus in the 3rd house of the house of thinking. And there are other things I'd like to say about that, but you know, maybe we're going to come back to other parts of the chart.
Could I just pop in there and say, I think that's just such a wonderful phrase, a detached intellectual clarity. I think that's such a beautiful phrase describing the upper echelons, as we say, of that Aquarian space. Aquarius actually means heaven. You know, or actually Uranus means heaven. And so it's kind of like it's all up there. And I do think his thought experiments and his sense of his scientific vision somehow came from heaven. You know, and I just picking up on another point, he never said he was a disbeliever. He never said he was an atheist. He said that he was an agnostic. Mm. And like many people, they couldn't believe necessarily in the mythic dynamics of many religions, but he did believe that there was something of a higher order, and that 9th house, and that Piscean element of no boundaries, you said, links him to something. Do you see? Something bigger, something larger, something much greater and more meaningful. Yeah. I'll just add that the quincunx is interesting here. We don't often talk about quincunxes between the Mercury and the Uranus. It's within the 3-degree allowed for a minor aspect. And I've seen people with quincunxes, they don't kind of express them as part of their personality so much as it just happens. There was a revolution in thinking. There was this Aryan dynamic to do with time, Saturn obviously, pushing through. And it just happened. He didn't set out to do it. That was just his natural thing. So I think quincunxes affect the fate of other people, and somehow they're used, if you like, by the genius of the universe through particular people. Anyway, I just wanted to say I very much support your analysis. Very interesting about the 14 Sagittarius, which I didn't know.
And actually, if I can just one other thing about his moon, adding to this theme, thank you, Richard, of boundlessness, is that at the time of Einstein's birth, his moon was out of bounds. And what that means is that planets normally orbit within the 23 degrees north or south of the ecliptic, but at the time of his birth, his moon was out of bounds. So it's more boundlessness. So that gives either an extreme quality or often a genius quality. And, you know, I very much agree with Richard, that quincunx between his Mercury and Uranus is so powerful, because I see that as almost connecting to the mind of God, connecting to the superconscious, you know, downloads and insights, because he had Uranus in the 3rd house of thinking. And what's fascinating as well is that he was, as you probably know, dyslexic. And I discovered this wonderful little biography of Einstein on my bookshelf. And apparently when Einstein's father asked his headmaster what profession he should pursue, his headmaster said he'll never be a success at anything because he was...
Well, he dropped out of school at age 15 because he was already doing differential calculus by that time. I mean, he was way ahead, way in advance. But you can clearly see he's inspired by something. They say that it was about a magnetic needle that his father gave him at age 5 to quell some of his anxieties, or when he was ill, and he tried to. This is apocryphal, but he also said it himself in one of his interviews that he didn't understand what controlled the needle, and that was the pole from the North Pole, the magnetic effect on needles, and it was that, he said, was primarily the motivation for his discoveries, because he saw in that an invisible force, an invisible magnetic force. And as you know, his father, of course, had a lot to do with the electric companies and various bits and pieces to do with that. Anyway, I just wanted to add just a little bit.
Yeah, amazing. That's just so interesting. I mean, I've seen this quite a lot, this Mercury Saturn with people who are dyslexic, and I often say to them, well, so was Einstein, but he did quite well.
Yes.
But what is fascinating, apparently, because I would have thought his work as a patents clerk was incredibly mundane for him.
Yes.
But what he did, apparently, and this comes from the biography, is he would read often quite badly written patent submissions, but he learnt the ability to drill down through the technical detail. Mercury, Saturn, very good at analysing the facts logically, but then could intuit the real idea behind the patent and help to rewrite them to make them legally viable. And that was the Uranus side. And also what you were saying, Richard, about his difficulties at school, of course, that's Uranus in the 3rd house of early schooling, not fitting in with early schooling. And seeing things from an oblique angle, Uranus in the 3rd, thinking originally, thinking differently, thinking from a different point of view. And what I got incredibly excited about, and I'm being a bit naughty here, to be honest, but the dwarf planet Salacia is at 3 degrees of Virgo at the time of his birth. And that is linked to the kind of iridescent light on the moonlight or the sunlight on the sea. There's that shimmering effect. I think it's very, very linked to photonic light, because the Earth is moving through the photon belt right now, that very bright, shimmering white light. And so here we not only have the moon on the great attractor with its gravitational force, but we have Uranus in his 3rd house of thinking, conjunct Salacia, also in that quincunx to Mercury. So if we're thinking about the photo, i.e. light, i.e. Salacia, electric, Uranus effect that he was writing about in his theory of relativity, and apparently that became the precursor to the photon theory of light.
Right.
I mean, and then he was very interested in the quantum structure of light, brings in the Saturn. I mean, that's why I was sitting here blowing fuses, thinking it's all there, as potential. And of course, we never know how fully people will live out their chart, but I think he did quite well.
Well, you can start to see in those associations. I think it was what he called the photoelectric effect. Sunlight hits a metal and it moves things, and so there was a kind of something to do with light waves. I can't profess to be but something to do with the nature of light was there, and I think that came in 1905. But you're going to come on to the progressions and things in a minute. Frank.
Yes. Okay, well, yes, just a couple of extra things I wanted to add about the Sun, Moon, Ascendant. First of all, and you both touched upon this, but the essence of Pisces, as Pam was saying, is boundless, but it's intrigued by the magic and mystery. If we think of Aquarius and Pisces being the final two signs, they really go beyond. There's that sense of what is out there and what isn't, and that the big questions of life. If you look at the great explorers of such, whether it's Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek, or Chris Carter of the X-Files, H.G. Wells, you're always looking at that Aquarius, Pisces, or the planetary rulers, Uranus or Neptune as well, that sense of going beyond, looking beyond. I think Pisces truly understands that everything is interconnected, everything is of consequence. How we treat our fellow man, our animals, the people around us, how we treat our neighbors, like our trees and all the other things that grow around us. Knowing everything is of consequence, and yet ultimately everything is just a drop in the ocean. Everything has a sort of tremendous meaning, but is just part of something much bigger in that way. Pisces is always, I think, the journey you often get with Pisces is that moving away from investing belief in what other people can do for you, gurus, religion. I call Pisces the rest cures, religion and pills sign, because of that sense of always wanting to escape or wanting to connect to nirvana in some way. But it's the discovery of the magic and the mystery inside of people, inside of oneself, rather than needing or investing in somebody else to do it for them. What comes really strongly across in this chart is that we have, looking at the Sun, Moon, Ascendant trio, what we call the big three often, gives us an insight into what's dominant. For example, we've got Cancer rising. The ruler of that is the Moon in Sagittarius. And then, of course, as you've mentioned, the Sun and the Moon are both in Jupiter signs, the big question mark, which takes us, again, as you've mentioned, into how important Jupiter is. Now, we know that Uranus is super important because it's the handle of the bucket chart. And if you've got, like Einstein had, all your planets in one part of half of the zodiac and then one standing out on its own, you tend to hold that handle in that case, or pour a lot of energy into that area. So Uranus is powerful in that sense, and Jupiter is powerful simply because it really represents so much of the energy of the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant.
Yes.
What I want to add,
Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so in traditional astrology, sometimes Lily would use that as a ruler sometimes. Even though it was an exalted lord, I just say that. So it very much is Jupiter. Interesting,
thank you. So Jupiter is, of course, the only air in the chart that he has, of fire, earth, air, and water, and a planet that, if you've got a singleton in a element like Einstein had, it tends to contain sort of everything that you're going to do with air. So Jupiter has that big job of really processing the air in his chart. I mean, he's water and fire, really, in his chart, which is sort of the inspiration and the imagination on different levels. So Jupiter is super important. It's the only air. We think of Jupiter in Aquarius as the potential to be the great humanitarian, the person who understands space, who understands the need for freedom, the respect of all types of people. Aquarius at its best, I think, is that sense of we're all one big family. The shadow side of it is the more, well, I'm in the first class section, and I always joke that Aquarius will fight for the group but doesn't want to sit down with the hoi polloi. There's that shadow snobbery connected to Aquarius at times. But at its very best, Jupiter in Aquarius has that real humanitarian, moral, ethical, the spirit of science, rather than the let's categorize it and dismiss anything that doesn't fit into our narrow realm. So we think of Jupiter in Aquarius as having that higher perspective, higher intelligence in that way. Jupiter-Uranus opposition is about discoveries, about space, about freedom. So that speaks incredibly well. And anything else to say about that? Probably not at the moment, but I just think that Jupiter holds so much of his famous cosmic mind, and the sense that he was really a member of a human race and felt that was more important. And he met, of course, he was in the times of the Hitler regime, the Third Reich, and again he met the need to express that universal humankind, that brotherhood, sisterhood as well. So, do either of you want to go further with the Jupiter at all?
I just wanted to add to that that the he was actually in the later stages of his career and in his life, he was an advocate for peace. Yes. And I believe that he was either a founder or a leader of a particular kind of group. And the FBI actually had files on him, because even though when he came from Germany in 1933 to the States, I think it was Princeton, he ended up in, he wrote a letter to the president saying that they should accelerate their nuclear weapons because that's what they were working on in Germany, and he knew that. But unfortunately, of course, his work on nuclear physics and all of that is his energy equation, very much Jupiter-Uranus, the explosive discoveries of new things, but at an atomic level, and something to do with that. And he didn't renege on that. He actually wrote a letter encouraging the Manhattan Project, but at the same time, he realized what he was doing and spent, I think, quite about 30 years supporting that. And that's why the FBI had files on him, because they worried whether he was going to be a subversive to in science as well, you know. So he never joined in with that, and deliberately took away from that. So that's the Jupiter humanitarian inside him, as well as the scientific researcher and discoverer that we so very much associate with the ninth house, voyages of the Starship Enterprise, but in his own case, voyages of the Starship Genius Brain.
And Pam?
Yeah, wonderful to hear all that. Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, which may have fueled that sense of humanitarianism and equality for all, is I get a strong feeling that as a child, he just felt that he didn't fit very well. Not only Uranus in the third, but the 11th house I see as the house of lovability. And when you have difficult planets in there, such as Pluto and Chiron, there's a sense of woundedness or not feeling lovable enough, particularly in your very early years. And, you know, there might have been lots of reasons for that, his dyslexia, Saturn, Mercury, whatever. And so that may have fueled, because there's a direct connection there between Pluto and Jupiter, that square, that may have fueled his need to see everybody equal, nobody excluded, nobody on the periphery. And of course, growing up in the, you know, obviously he lived through the 1930s and all that brought, and that may have really galvanized a lot of his work too, I think.
Good word, that, galvanized. Well, both Pam and myself, we were speaking just earlier about Noel Till and his pioneering work in the 70s and 80s and so on. And he calls the 11th house the love received from other people, because the 5th is love given, or your creativity given, whether it's in play or fun or entertainments. But the 11th house is your participation with others, and so your friends. And you know, so it is very much to do with self-worth. That 11th, all of the sexton houses have to do with that. But I just thought I'd bring that in. I like that word galvanized, because that's very to do with electricity, isn't it?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So as soon as we get on that association track, the words start to flow through.
Yeah, wonderful.
One thing, one final thing before we have a quick look at 1905 is the Mercury-Saturn. And the issue with Mercury-Saturn in a lot of textbooks suggests backward thinking, backward learning. You're given the impression, sadly, a bit like having Mercury retrograde in your chart. You're given the impression online or in certain books that it's a handicap, and yet you see so many remarkable minds with Mercury Saturn. And do either of you, Pam, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, what I found, and by the way, I was born with Mercury retrograde, and I absolutely love it. My life would be much less rich without it. But what I see with these people is, for whatever reason, they've developed a fantastic ability with concentration, that they can drill down and work through a project incredibly thoroughly and comprehensively till they get to the end. Just a very focused powers of concentration. I see that repeatedly, whether they think they weren't as bright at school, so they had to work harder, or whatever the reason, it produces a benefit as an adult.
Oh yes, whenever you get the Saturn position, you immediately think a deficit, something that's been denied, something that, or you feel has been denied, whether it's subjective or objective is the miracle of astrology. Sometimes it actually shows an actual objective situation that happened, and sometimes it's just our own emotional reactions. But I like this power of focus, I think, is the Aries, and the power of concentration is the Saturn. But there would have been a deficiency, a sense of inferiority around the Saturn placement, that he wasn't up to the mark. Some people said he wasn't, but I think he just followed his own way, and who knows the ways of genius, really. Maybe he never really felt that he could achieve, and as you say, Pam, overcompensated, as people do, for their Saturn positions, and so that makes them very powerful, makes them a master of that particular sphere that it's in. Yeah.
The key often with Mercury Saturn is the person with the specialist subject, the mastermind, the one with concentration. Often I think Mercury Saturn can be humility, that sense of, well, this is what I know, but the very bright people in the world know how much they don't know. And I think if you're aware of that, rather than thinking, well, I found the truth, which Moon in Sagittarius can feel, sometimes there's that discovery, and that's what I'm holding on to, in the sense of being right. It comes with Sagittarius, comes with the fixed signs, but that Mercury Saturn in Aries, working hard to become the expert, leading the way in that Aries way, the independent thinker, but also the idea of what he did was to reject the quote unquote voice of authority at school, the voice of the Nazi regime. The Mercury Saturn in Aries decided to find its own voice, to become its own specialist, rather than be told what to think, what to believe. He was a late talker. Yes. As Pam mentioned, he worked in the patent office, which is so Mercury Saturn, and that ability to be precise as well, even in Aries, that sense of let's get to the heart of it and summarize it, do it quickly. He would have probably been a great fan of Twitter, and had he been around, perhaps. He once said, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. And he said,
great quote.
Isn't that very Mercury Saturn, and Uranus in the third? And logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So we know where he was really coming from. We're going to have a look at that 1905 for a moment, with what Pam's looked at. What interested me before that is at the age of 9 and 10, he's given his first science books. And I think when we look at solar arc directions, where everything in the chart moves forward 1 degree a year, everything, we can see that the sun is 9-10 degrees away from that Mercury Saturn. So his path is opened up by the introduction to a science book, Mercury Saturn. And then he starts to put the pieces together in his own way. So those very early solar arcs are so important for understanding how we're going to see the world, and how we write the scripts that determine how we view the world, and how we intellectualize that is so often how we experience things. So with that in mind, he mentioned his key year was 1905. Would you like to end with that, Pam?
Yes, it was just, I picked up just 2 really major solar arcs, which were solar arc Jupiter, this reaching out to the cosmos, conjunct his sun. Beautiful aspect of success, recognition. He described, as I say, as his miracle year. And also the solar arc North Node, was conjunct his Jupiter. So there's a lot of Jupiter reinforcement here, which is, as I say, really shining in the world. It can bring in honors, and certainly big thinking. Jupiter ruling his house, the sixth house of work, and the sun ruling his third house of thinking and writing. So, those are two huge solar arcs, and he certainly felt them, to call it his miracle year. And it was part of his soul's path of growth. North Node, I very much see as that soul's path of growth in this lifetime, what he had the potential to bring forth into the world.
And we can see that year, and I've just set it for February, but it obviously was going on all year, that Mercury and Saturn at the very end of Aries, after a lifetime, his whole lifetime being in Aries, they're leaving Aries. And I always think at the final degrees of Aries is that quick, let's get it done before we move into Taurus. It might slow us down, or let's work on it. So there's a real urgency to produce, to specialize in a way. Last thing I wanted to add is that he was a lover of music all his life, which again comes back to the Pisces quality and the moon in Sagittarius, perhaps the Jupiterian quality, the water in the chart. He said, I live my daydreams in music. And he said the most beautiful, isn't that beautiful? Yes. And he said the most beautiful and most profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It's the sower of all true science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. And I think he's really speaking the heart of his chart there with Pisces.
Can I just finally add just a couple of things in my notes? We've covered it basically, that his hobbies, of course, were so-called hobbies. He wanted to be a musician. He played the violin, so that's the music element. But he also liked smoking. And it's said that by many journalists that you could always smell him, and you could always see these kind of plumes of smoke going everywhere. It's a very Piscean, misty kind of thing moving in that, and all that. And you know me, Frank, I said I was an orarist. I always have a love of names. And some of my work deals with the fact that the 10th house often reveals the name. It's how we're known by others. Yes, and you can see here, and the name of Einstein actually means a stone, and you will notice that Neptune's in Taurus. And if there's any planet that relates to any planet, it's Saturn, or if there's any rock to do with the hardness of things. And Albert actually means to be famous, which is very much the other side of that Pisces, because it's a Jupiter, and you wrote a wonderful paper on fame and notoriety and linked it with Jupiter. It actually, Albert means to be bright or well known or in advance of, to be seen. So I just thought I'd add that couple of little astrological points of detail. Fascinating how the 10th house, sometimes the first house, does show or has a connection to the name, either through meaning or through image in some way. So I just thought I'd show that, to show the detail of the chart coming to life, as we've all done today.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Pam, did you want to end with anything at all that we haven't covered?
No, I think I may have mentioned it on the walk through, but just to really emphasize that all of that intellect, that detached intellectual clarity that we talked about, had to have a spiritual context, particularly with the North Node in the 8th house, and really Mars just on the edge of that, the cusp of the 8th house. It had to have that containment of spirituality, I think, and that's so important, because he was considered a visionary, wasn't he?
Yes.
Still is, very much so. So, no, I think that's it. Yeah, fascinating.
Thank you. We really got, this chart is a combination of Jupiter very strongly, and of course Uranus, and that really gives us the vision and the ability to break the mold, to see things, see that vision and make it a new one, or see new ways of envisioning the future. So thank you so much, both of you. Truly appreciate your time. Thanks to my co-host, Richard Swatton, and to our very special eminent guest, Pam Gregory. You can find us on www.astrologysquad.com. And please do like our videos and join us for the next videos in the series. Thanks, everybody.
Cheerio.
Bye.